Every January, I hear this same question from business owners. Should I franchise this year? Sometimes that question comes from excitement, sometimes from frustration, and sometimes from pure pressure. Maybe they're seeing their competitors expanding, or their margins are tightening, or their growth is starting to slow down. But here's the truth. Most businesses that want to franchise aren't actually ready to franchise. And that's not a knock on them, it's just simply reality. I'm Justin Kaiser, and I've spent the last 24 years building businesses. I built a franchise brand from scratch and scaled it to over 100 franchise territories in 3 years before an acquisition. What I've learned along the way is that franchising isn't something you do to just figure things out. It's something you do once you're very clear about what you're building. Napoleon Hill said that success comes from definiteness of purpose. And in business, definiteness of purpose matters more than people realize. Because franchising doesn't create clarity, it demands it. One of the biggest misconceptions about franchising is that it's a shortcut, that it's faster, that it's easier, or less involved. But the opposite is true. Franchising doesn't fix problems, it amplifies them. Weak systems get weaker, thin margins get thinner, and businesses that only work because the owner is deeply involved tend to break. Franchising only works when the business is already built to be duplicated. So the real question isn't, can my business be franchised? It probably can. The question is, can my business be duplicated by someone else and be profitable without me? If the answer to that is no, then franchising won't create leverage for you. It'll create friction. First, your unit economics have to be proven. You don't need dozens of locations, but you do need proof. You need consistent profitability. You need predictable margins and clear startup and operating costs. Because if the numbers only work under perfect conditions, they won't work for franchisees. Second, the business has to run on systems, not just hustle. If success depends on you stepping in, solving problems, or being the best salesperson in the room, that's not a franchise-ready business because franchise systems work through process, not personality. Third, the model has to be teachable. Doing something well and teaching someone else to do it well are two very different things. If the training feels inconsistent or chaotic, franchising will magnify that problem. Fourth, you have to be willing to give up more control than you think. Franchisees aren't employees, they're independent business owners. And if you're not prepared to enforce standards without micromanaging, franchising will feel restrictive instead of freeing. And fifth, you have to want to build a system, not just sell locations. The strongest franchise brands aren't built by people chasing speed. They're built by founders with a clear purpose who are thinking long-term about brand, structure, and durability. Most franchise systems don't fail because the idea was bad. They fail because the business was franchised too early. Too early for systems, too early for support, too early for structure. And once a franchise system is broken, it's incredibly hard to fix. Being franchise ready doesn't mean you have to franchise. It just means that you're making a strategic decision instead of an emotional one. And sometimes the right answer is not franchising yet. Franchising is powerful, however, when it's done right at the right time. And also when it's done for the right reasons. And when the goal isn't to franchise, but the goal is to build something that's worth duplicating. Because when that's all in place, franchising becomes a strategy, not a gamble. If you want to have a productive conversation about whether franchising makes sense for your business now or later, that's exactly the type of conversation that we're going to have here. No pressure, no pitch, just clarity. If you're not ready, we'll give it to you straight. But if you built something great, if you want to scale with systems, marketing, support, and capital aligned, then schedule a free growth strategy session with us, and let's talk about building your empire together. Until then, be well, and remember, you are awesome.